I know I'm not a massive fan of the weekend off, but what it does do, it makes you hungry for footy, and Thursday night can't come quick enough. We've got the big one between Richmond and Brisbane. One of those teams goes through, one will go out. Melbourne and Sydney on Friday night at the MCG. Collingwood and Geelong are sellout already. It's twilight Saturday afternoon at the G as well, and then we turn our attention to the West, where Freo re-enter the finals under Justin Longmuir and take on the Western Bulldogs. So got 4 magnificent games of footy to get our head around, and I cannot wait for them to start. Tom Lynch to join us on the couch tonight as well, so get all that stuff out. A little promo there, Coxie. And the buck stops here, kicks us off on a Monday.
So I usually do 5 buck stops here. I'm going to save the 5th one for later. I'm going to do 1 each on each of the games coming up this weekend. I'm starting with Geelong v Collingwood, and it's going to be about the start. Predominantly for Geelong. I see this as largely a 50-50 game, but Geelong need to get off to a good start. They are 1 from their last 7 of qualifying finals, 2 of 8.
Hang on, let's just take that. When you told me that this morning, I knew they hadn't had great records, so they've only won 1 of their last 7 qualifying finals. So this is the thing, right? When you're talking about Geelong, I'm just expanding on what you're saying. Chris Scott I love Chris Scott. I love what they do. And I can't understand the negativity, although I think there's less and less of it these days. But he puts his side in the beautiful position every year, gives them a chance. But they've only won 1 of that first final.
They have, and that was a 2-point win against Hawthorn back in 2016. Jeez. So the last 2 have been games away at Adelaide Oval, and Port Adelaide have knocked them over.
Yep.
But 2 of the last 3, they've been jumped in these games. So there is a psychological element to this, and it will be spoken about as we get closer to the game.
And as a coach, a former coach, you will bristle. Not you. The coach will bristle.
Well, Chris Scott's got every right to bristle about it, but
the fact is,
you can't go away from 7. Yeah, that is, and so 8 times he's put his side out of 13. He's put his side in the top 4 position. That's pretty bloody amazing.
That's why I love Chris Scott.
It's amazing.
But they've only won 1 of 7
of these games, and it either sets up your September or makes it bloody impossible.
Well,
So this is what I do see it as a 50-50 game. And the last time Collingwood met Geelong in this game was 2019, and it was Collingwood as a 4th place side and Geelong as the top place side, and they got jumped. They were 5 goals behind 5 minutes into the second quarter. Yes, and Geelong worked their way back in the game, but it was a narrow 10-point loss. The last time they played against Port Adelaide, that was a top 4 game against Port was last year. They were jumped and they were 5 goals down at half time. So it's going to be crucial for Geelong to get into this game quickly and early. I think they have a more aggressive mindset in regards to taking the game to the opposition offensively than they've had in these previous years. And I think we're going to know about that attitude in the first 5 or 10 minutes of this game, because Collingwood will give themselves every chance, and if they're able to jump Geelong, they will put themselves in an enormous position because they've been running games out better than anyone. We know they've been winning those close games, but
so Collingwood.
I see this. I'm talking about Collingwood, but I see this as a 50-50 game. Early this far out, I still reckon Geelong's can best Collingwood, even though that they've been, but these are the 2 teams that have won more than any other team, more than any other teams in the back half of the year. So it's a fascinating final that we're going into.
So good. I mean, no wonder it's sold out already. Saturday, twilight, MCG. The big dogs on top of the ladder have done everything right against this precocious upstart that's just taken all before them. It's a promoter's dream, that game. Can't wait.
It's going to be awesome. The second game I'm going to look at is Brisbane-Richmond, and these two played out and battled on the MCG when Brisbane got off to a great start, but Richmond came home with a flurry. 2 heaviest scoring teams in the competition. My question is, can Brisbane actually defend Richmond's offence? So I'm not as concerned about Richmond defending Brisbane as I am about Brisbane being able to defend. They were at the top of the ladder, Brisbane, after round 12, and they were top of the ladder with 134%. Since then, they've gone 5 wins, 4 losses, and they finished 6th. In that time, they've played top 8 teams. They played Melbourne, who they gave up 117 points to. Richmond in that game, 104, and Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, 115. They had a really good performance against the Bulldogs where they kept them to 67. But 3 out of those 4 top 8 teams, they were unable to keep under 100 points. Essendon beat them with a 100-point win, and even when they beat Gold Coast, there was a 93 points. So they're leaking. They've got Ainsworth out. Gardner's been shaky. They haven't been able to put enough forward pressure on. Richmond are the best transition scoring team in the competition. Are they able to defend well enough? And we've got Chris Fagan coming up out at 8, and I will be posing some questions to him about what work they're going to do at being able to do that.
Is the question for the Brisbane Lions up against the Richmond Footy Club coming in. Hey, throw through any of the little talking points you want along the way. 0433 98 11 16. Just send them through. We'll work our way through them. Bucks is in the middle of his buck stops.
Third game is the Melbourne-Sydney qualifying final. Both of these sides have been huge, and Melbourne had that little hiccup in the middle, and that's when they last played Sydney. And Sydney beat them in round 12 on the MCG by 12 points. So Melbourne had lost to Fremantle, got run over, started the game well against Freo in round 11 and then got run over. Yep. And then they started the game well against Sydney and got run over. And they looked tired. They looked a little complacent, and Sydney won't play the same Melbourne when they come to the MCG this weekend. My question is around the contested ball battle, and can Sydney put enough pressure when they don't win can they put enough pressure on the Melbourne midfield to be and their backline to be able to turn the ball over and score the way they have in the last 6 to 8 weeks, where they've really sharpened the saw and been able to elevate their game and bring their forwards into the contest by just putting massive pressure on the opposition. So it's a contested ball pressure battle for me. I think that Sydney have to go to another level again, because I just like the way that Melbourne have come about in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be a pressure test for both teams. And the last one is Western Bulldogs and Freo. And the question for me is, can the Western Bulldogs do it again? 2016, after the first pre-finals bye, and they got 5 players back, and they went from the bottom 4 all the way through 4 finals in a row, and were able to win that famous premiership. They have had a middling season. They've been up and down. They're only one of 2 teams that I thought actually lowered their expectations, that weren't able they and Port Adelaide, I thought, were the 2 in particular outside of the bottom 4 sides that just sides I expected to make the top 8 that just haven't raised their game and been at their best. But the Dogs have stumbled in. But the question is now, it's not necessarily about stumbling, because that season is done. And Luke Beveridge would be a master at being able to draw the line, letting that go, having the prospects about what could happen or what could be. And so I think psychologically they'll be ready. The question is, can they do it again? I think they'll believe. They're coming up against a Fremantle side whose best performance in the second half of the year was against the Western Bulldogs. They defended them really well. They took about 140 uncontested marks and denied them the ball. And they had a really distinct style, but the Dogs will have been able to go to school on that. This is a fascinating contest. We're going to have 4 great games, and I'm looking forward to them all. But can Freo defensively take the game away from a Western Bulldogs side who will believe? And that'll be fascinating.
Love it. So there's the finals record for the Cats. So the importance of a fast start from a Brisbane point of view. Can they defend big scores? Sydney, the contest, and then the Bulldogs. Is the magic still there? And then your other idea in a moment. Just so a couple of my observations. I've had a little bit of the slows on Brisbane. Their strength is also their weakness. So Danaher, Hipwood, McStay, Cameron, McCarthy, Loom is really dangerous, but they don't defend. So ball goes in, mark, crumb, or gone up the other way. And it was really obvious against Melbourne. They couldn't keep the footy in their forward 50, struggled against the Melbourne defence, who, a really good defensive side. So my concern for them is exactly that. If they're not grabbing it, and this is why the pressure will go on Danaher and Hipwood particularly. in this big final. They've got to be able to mark the ball. With you on the Sydney-Melbourne, I was at that game just as an observer at the MCG that Saturday night, and it was all-round contest, so no great secrets to that. And then you have some great individual matchups too, with Big Buddy back on this big stage, strutting his stuff will be great. Tom McDonald played VFL footy. I watched a bit of that on the weekend. He looked a fair way off it from mine. I'd be surprised if they brought him back into the side. But he got a game under his belt, so that's a good thing. Collingwood and Geelong, forewarned is forearmed. So the Cats know what's coming from the Pies, which I think's great. So there'll be no secrets to this game, which I'm looking forward to most. They just put it out there. The Collingwood go, hey, this is the way we play, and Geelong go, righto, we know it, and let's go and see how we go about it. And if it gets close and they let Nick Dacos run around, I will scream from the top of the rooftops. And then I did Freo Western Bulldogs as a commentator. That was only 3 or 4 weeks ago. And the Western Bulldogs, within the first 10 minutes, I looked at it and went, oh, jeez. They just refused to push up on their opposition, and that's why they took all these uncontested marks. Rory Lobb kicked 4 of the best goals you'll ever likely to see, mainly from where the 50 intersects with the boundary line. He just kept pumping them through. I'm not sure Taberner, I hope he's going to play for Freo's sake. What they have done, the Bulldogs, since that time is they've introduced Sam Darcy into. Now, this is a ridiculous thing to say given he's played about 3 games, but he makes them better up forward, Sam Darcy.
Say that again.
He makes them better.
But the weekend that we've just had, Gaz, so I think you can. I love the AFLW launch, and I love this position of it in the season, and it has its own space. But I still reckon there's room to have our cake and eat it. So my suggestion is to bring in a wild card weekend.
That old chestnut. Yep.
So 7th plays 10th, 8th plays 9th. For the last 2 spots, the top 6 teams get a breather. The top 4 teams still get their home, their home, or to get the double chance, and the top 2 teams still get their home final with the double chance. But if 7 played 10th, then Richmond would have played St Kilda, and Western Bulldogs would have played Carlton. Now, I would have loved to have seen Carlton go around again and get another chance at it. Now, the way that was written, they had their chances and they didn't quite get there. But if you had those 2 games, you could actually leverage off, say, a Friday and a Saturday night, and the AFLW could leverage off that, and you could play some curtain raisers, and you're going to get the girls playing in front of 40, or more to the point, you're going to get 40, 50, 60,000 people being able to see that game live.
Yep.
And that exposure only takes that to another level. So I think it's great for AFLW. I reckon each of those games is worth around $10 million to the AFL. And what I would do with that, man, I know it doesn't work like this, but what I would do with that money is I'd flip it straight back into coaching and development, because the soft cap in the AFL men's and in the AFL women's has been impacted in the last 3 or 4 years, and it has been smashed. The coaching levels have and remuneration has been smashed, and we've got staff numbers that have reached drastically low levels due to the soft cap. I would tip that straight back into that, because if we don't reinvest into there, then we are going to see we're going to see the product start tipping off in the next 4 or 5 years. So there's a little bit in that, but I reckon it's a win-win-win. I still reckon there's room for a couple of key marquee dates for the AFL men's. I think we can wind in the AFLW, and there's a good financial gain there for both organisations.
So it comes up at this time of year every year, which is, I'm not saying that that's anything other than this is the wild card's always debated.
Yep.
So that would mean the Bulldogs to replicate 2016 would have to win 5 on the bounce.
Yep.
You happy with that?
Yep. Well, I just think that I mean I don't know if I'm like most, but I think that that weekend you can still achieve what you're trying to achieve, and I think it was partly around having coaches sort of pull players out when they're not going to move up or down. You know, when you're playing a round 23 into a finals, and you sort of, okay, we're going to rest my players here. So we can still prevent that from happening. But it actually, I think it gives us a purpose for this weekend. And it still gives plenty of teams a rest. It still provides that delineation between what we know of home and away and the final 8. and I don't think it would. I don't think it would hurt.
Righto. I don't even need to solicit for people's thoughts on that because they're coming through thick and fast. We'll get to them in a minute. Joe's in Geelong. G'day, Joe.
Oh, g'day, fellas. Yeah, sort of agree. Look, I just think it's a real shame that the momentum carried, from all those really close games in the men's. I know we've got the women's round. We can have both. And my suggestion is, instead of having the men's no footy now, have the rest before the week, the grand final. Imagine the build-up. And so people have 2 weeks to plan their grand final parties, and the two teams have 2 weeks to recover from usually a grueling finals, and it would be a better spectacle, I think, or could be.
Well, good on you, Joey. I like all these different ideas that come up at the moment. Chris Fagan, who's going to join us, doesn't like the pre-finals bye, thinks that it doesn't reward those teams that finish in the top 2 with a weekend off, which is fair enough as well. Simon's in Clyde North. G'day, Simon.
Good day, guys. How are you?
Thank you.
That's good. Bucks was just talking about how we're losing coaches with the soft cap coming down. I'm just ringing up about an ex-Melbourne player who's coaching the Collegians at the moment in the VAFA. He's won 9 in a row, and he could be lost to the AFL system because of this. His name's Jared Rivers.
Yeah, well, Jared was with Collingwood and was one of the people who lost their jobs through this, through the soft cap cull, and there's a lot of quality coaches and a lot of them younger developing coaches that have missed out on experience, but they've gone and gathered it outside of the AFL system. But I think it's something that's happening under the surface of what we're seeing at the moment. It's not just the coaches that have been culled; it's actually the ones that remain, and they're asked to do 150% or 200% of their workload from 4 or 5 years ago, and they're being remunerated at about 70% of the level. So you've got less coaches doing more work. They're stretched thin, and the only people that are negatively affected by that outside of the coaches themselves are the players, because you're getting a watered down version of what you used to get, and eventually that will take a toll.
So there is going to be, is it $500,000 extra next year in the soft cap? That been?
I think there's been some adjustments, but compared to, say, the players' TPP, or the general revenue that's coming into the game, the money that's been tipped in AFLW for to be transparent, the existing arrangements, I'm not expecting that they were going to continue being exponential the way that they were through the last decade, but the last 3 or 4 years has been a real smack in the face, and there's the pressure and expectation on football departments at the moment, and their capacity to deliver with 60% of the resources that they've once had at their disposal is not sustainable.
Can I ask you one? I'll ask you now, and then we might have to get to it after 17 News headlines. The All-Australian team, of which you're a selector.
Yep.
Tell me, because it wasn't communicated before, and maybe there was no communication about it, the process of selecting the captain of the All-Australian team.
Well, I've got to declare that I was in a general anaesthetic and getting my pec fixed whilst the last meeting was taking place. So I sent my team in and my notes around why I've selected that team. But I wasn't there. I wasn't privy to the discussion around the captain.
Okay. Are you supportive of Tom? And I'll make anyone who's listening to me talk about Tom Hawkins knows how much I love him.
Yep.
Do you think it was the right move to appoint a non-captain as the captain?
I can understand how it has been received with a bit of with some questions, given the way he was asked the question. He goes, I've never been a captain throughout my entire football journey. Look, we talk about putting this team out as if we were going to roll it out and play. That doesn't happen. So we're sort of continuing on this make-believe fantasy. Yeah. So if we want to go to the next level and say, is he the right bloke to captain the side? I think it's an honorary position.
Okay, that's
I think in those terms, I think it was right to honour him with that captaincy, given the position that he's held
That's all I need.
At the upper echelon.
I haven't heard that officially, and you're surmising because you weren't there, so it's not your fault. But if it is honorary, tell us.
Well, Lance Franklin was made captain about 3 or 4 years ago,
yes,
and he hasn't been a captain.
Right. So was Andy McLeod. That's okay, and I don't care, right?
Yep.
Tell us. We are living in a compromised football environment anyway. Everything's compromised in footy. So if you're saying, look,
yep.
if it's Gill's captain call because he wants to make one of the greats of the game feel even better, tell us. Because it makes no sense.
I get that. What you're getting when you pick an All-Australian team is 22 of the best leaders in the game. I think
that's true.
I think that you're clearly getting the elite performers.
You've got one though who was the All-Australian captain, all he did from the point when he was the All-Australian captain was captain the premiership team, who then backed up with his 6th All-Australian, and he's not the captain or the vice captain. Okay, if it's honorary and it's Gill's feel good, I want to make everyone great, tell us, communicate it. Don't just go, here's the captain.
I get it.